So the Hive think tank is a community of practitioners, data scientists, designers, artists, all focused around big data. We host events almost every week. We have over 5,000 members, so welcome to the community. It's one of the largest community, data-driven community in the Bay Area, and I believe in the US, and maybe the world. I have to check that. And we hosted more than 50 events with over 100 speakers since we started in October 2012. Those are our upcoming events, so make sure to register now that you are a member of the Hive think tank. Now that you are a data bee, you can attend these events. We hope to see you there. We'd like to thank you, our sponsors, but also NetApp tonight for hosting us. For tonight, if you use Twitter, you can use the hashtag HiveData and continue the conversation online. You can also follow us on Facebook. We post great pictures of you, of us at the office, lots of fun stuff. And we also have Twitter, and we also have a newsletter, so you can follow us on Paperly. And I'm going to hand the microphone to Ravi, who is going to do a short introduction about the Hive. Thank you.
Thank you, Pashu. So the fallacies of big data. So just a little bit about the Hive, and so I'll keep it brief. So we are three things. We incubate and launch companies. We are a fund, and the third is the think tank that Pashu heads up. And so the focus for us is on data-driven startups and primarily applications and use cases. So you won't see us do a lot of companies in the infrastructure space. Either line of business applications or different vertical segments. As Pashu mentioned, a special area of interest for us is IoT. So if any of you are interested in being a part of a company, in starting a company, reach out to us. We are hiring. Some of our companies are hiring. So E8 Security, as the name suggests, is in the security space. Deforest Media is in the mobile advertising space. Perspica is where networking meets data. So just go to our website and you'll find more details. Be a part of the conversation today. So use hashtag HiveData, and so others can also join the conversation and listen to what you're saying. So I'm really excited to have this great panel of speakers who are going to be talking about IoT and telco. And so with that, I'd like to introduce my good friend, Brian Velkov of Artimon Ventures. Maybe the whole panel, why don't you come on over?
Thank you, sir.
We have assigned seating, apparently. So.
Yes. High school. Perfect. So are the mics on? Yeah, sounds like it. So thanks for coming tonight. As Ravi mentioned, this panel is about IoT and the role of telcos. I'll let, in a few minutes, everybody introduce themselves. I think we should start with just a quick poll so we know kind of who's in the audience. So just give us a kind of show of hands. Who's from startup world or an entrepreneur? Okay. And corporates, big companies? Okay. And VCs, other types? Okay. VCs and other types. All the other. Okay, perfect. So we've broken the discussion into 4 rough topics today. And so how we'll do it is we'll cover questions in each section. If you guys have questions specific to that topic, which I'll run through in a minute, raise your hand, just come up to the mic in the middle, and we'll try and answer them then. We'll also leave time at the very end to answer kind of general questions or any comments you have. So the 4 basic topics are the IoT market opportunity in general, verticals and that sort of thing. What are the technologies that exist and that are needed in order to make IoT happen? The telco enterprise relationship, so consumer and enterprises. And then we'll wrap up with the value of IoT. So how do we make money from it, and what's really the use cases that are driving the deployments? So with that said, I'll let each panelist kind of introduce themselves, and then we'll jump in.
Pavan Singh, you guys can hear me okay, right? Yep, okay. Pavan Singh, I work for Cisco. I lead the IoT vertical strategy, and the next question you guys will ask me, what does that mean? So at Cisco, we have a big investment in IoT. We call it Internet of Everything. And our goal is to invest in a few in enterprise segments that have a value today and continue to invest to develop the market further.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Wong. I'm with Verizon in the corporate strategy organization. I've been working on machine-to-machine and Internet of Things over the last 6 years, and just about 2.5 years ago, moved into the corporate strategy organization, which really looks to transform how Verizon will operate, say, 3 to 5 years out. You know, if today our core is, our IP connectivity, our cellular, Fios, how do we transform our business in the long term? And certainly IoT is a big part of that.
So hi, I'm Jeff Karras, and I'm Managing Director with a venture fund called Singtel Innovate Ventures. We're an independent fund, about $250 million. We've got a single investor in Singapore Telecom, and for those of you who may or may not know, Singtel Group is the second largest carrier footprint in the world, about 500 million plus subscribers across 25 countries. We invest in everything from $200,000 seeds to 20 million later stages across pretty much a pretty broad area of everything from core networking, enterprise, and digital media. We've got a couple of investments in the IoT space, a startup called Neura, and actually a company called Jasper Wireless.
Nice tie-in. Hi, I'm Macario. I lead marketing for Jasper. Jasper, for those of you who are not aware, we provide a cloud platform that is used by enterprises and mobile operators to help these companies capitalize on what we now generally refer to as the Internet of Things. The company has been around 10 years and always exclusively focused on this domain. Today we support over 1,000 enterprises from connected car companies like GM, Ford, Nissan, Tesla, Amazon Kindles, John Deere tractors, Boston Scientific heart pacemakers, incredibly diverse, enriched set of companies and verticals and use cases. And we're partnered with 21 mobile operator groups that represent over 120 unique carriers around the world, including Singtel.
I'm Moten Abian, and I am with Samsung Electronics. I lead an innovation lab in San Jose, which is primarily focused on consumer IoT and smart connected devices. What we basically do within Samsung's device portfolio, we combine very simple and elegant design, hardware and software, and particularly I call out machine learning to enable experiences that cannot be done just with normal software and hardware relationship. My team has a very interesting structure. It's like 5 startups within this one organization and within a very large company. And they each are mandated to take an idea from conception all the way to launch within Samsung into the market. So we use all the things that you folks at startups use, like Eric Rice's lean startup model and CD from Steve Blank's. And we run like startup culture within a large company.
Perfect. Okay. So first question, I think this is for everybody. We'll just kind of go down the line. What are the near-term IoT verticals that will have the biggest impact from a market perspective? Let's each pick 2 and explain why. Start with you, Paul.
Oh, hi. I was hoping to start on the other side. I shouldn't have sat next to Brian here. So the 2 things, the way we look at it, we're very focused on enterprise IoT. And there's a reason for that. We think that there are hard problems to be solved in this whole, let's not call it enterprise, but the non-consumer stuff. And I'll just explain a little bit what that is. Number one, to give you an example, if a factory is down, it loses about $22,000 per minute of down, right? A machine just breaking down. That's it, right? So if you multiply that by, take the 100 hours of 1 minute, 100 hours, it's about $130 million. We lose about $120 billion in wasted time and fuel just being in traffic. So my top two verticals are connected to that is number one is the city infrastructure. Just like roads were used to be city infrastructure, now connectivity is city infrastructure. Making sure you know when buses arrive, you can have Wi-Fi, you know where parking spots are, all of that stuff. That's number one. Number two is the industrial side, and I give you guys an example of factory. So let's talk about manufacturing is kind of undergoing a renaissance on how things were done, because believe it or not, the uncarpeted world, which is the factory floor, a mine, oil and gas rig, they are still in the internet connectivity age of 60s. They're still just not connected yet. So that's a big opportunity.
Okay. So my two picks would be telematics, transportation, as well as smart grid, right? So, in the United States, on average, folks spend about an hour commuting every day. How nice would it be to make that experience a little bit more pleasant, maybe a little bit less stressful to be on the road for that long? And as well, today in the United States, there are about 30,000 motor vehicle deaths in the year. Is there a way to make our automobiles, our infrastructure more intelligent in order to make the roads safer for everyone, right? So when we think about transportation, there's the consumer side of the house, which is, whether it's in the long term, the autonomous vehicle, driverless cars, that will definitely make my day, because I commute about an hour and a half each way. And then there's also the infotainment side of the house, which is kind of more near term, which is, can the folks in the back seat actually watch some videos or do some other entertainment activities while they're in the car? I would also say now on the commercial side of the house, when you have fleets that are on the road all the time, there are lots of ways in order to get navigation information, traffic information, driver information, optimization, capacity information for those fleets that you can use to optimize how your fleet operates in order to get a better ROI. I do agree with you in that the enterprise side of the house is much more ROI driven. And so if you can prove out that ROI, then adoption is going to be far greater. And so that's also what we see in commercial fleets. There is a definitive ROI, so you see better adoption. On the consumer side of the house, I think consumers need to be convinced a little bit more about what that value proposition is. Okay. My other pick is smart grid. So when we think about our utility infrastructure today, it is completely antiquated, very much needs to be updated against new and different threats. Right? We have cybersecurity issues that need to be taken care of, given all of the attacks, especially from overseas. We have extreme weather events, and then we just have natural breakdowns and blackouts that occur. So, for example, the August 2003 blackout that occurred across the East Coast cost $6 billion in economic losses, right? There needs to be a way, an upgrading of our entire utilities infrastructure in order to ensure that those failures do not occur.
So actually, I tend to agree with all the comments that have been made so far. But the way I kind of look at answering that question is, what are the barriers in terms of these technologies being adopted, and where is sort of the greatest foothold that's been gained so far? And if just picking two, I would go back to actually more the industrial or even enterprise space, where I think actually a lot of these technologies have been in use, and a lot of the issues are still around just integrating with some of the antiquated technologies or antiquated systems that are out there. But I think there's a number of things that are already in place, and so I think that space will continue to develop. On kind of one of the newer fronts, I think we're going to start seeing a wave of the connected automobile, and I think the car, if you look at like a Tesla, I think that's just sort of a sign of the future for what cars will be and what they can become, and I think you're going to start seeing more rapid acceleration in that space, faster than some of the others.
I'll take a slightly different slice in terms of the viewpoint, although we may come to similar things, which is we'll look at, what is the near-term market opportunity. Certainly, there's lots of profound changes and lots of great examples of smaller companies that can have a dramatic impact. But in terms of our business and what we see, the highest growth areas, connected car, which we talked about, and connected home. And connected car is an interesting driver. You picked up Tesla, and one of the biggest drivers for the car manufacturers, as much as you talk about the consumer models and be able to put Wi-Fi hotspot in the car and all these cool app stores inside of the vehicle, one of the biggest drivers for the OEMs is to be able to lessen the burden, the cost, and the pain associated with the recall. And so just as in the month of February, just as Tesla was sent a software update over the air to raise the chassis, Toyota recalled 1.9 million Priuses, all for a software update. It's an incredibly expensive endeavor for Toyota, but also horribly painful and a horrible hit to Toyota's brand for the consumer. So that is one of the biggest drivers for the car manufacturers to embed connectivity. And then to be able to find other ways to monetize it is all sort of icing on the cake. Connected home is one of the fastest growing segments we see as well. And there's lots of flavors of that, Nest being probably the one that's most famous with its thermostat and smoke alarm. But we see a lot of the home security guys coming in, and they're using, that is one of the original IoT deployments is a home security system because it's connected, has to be an always available connection to be able to sound the alarm. And more and more of these guys are moving into the home automation space and trying to layer on additional monetization opportunities. And just looking at the device connections that we see on our business, I mean, those two sectors are growing like wildfire.
I agree with most of what other panelists said, but before I say what two sectors in our view are two of the most promising ones, the indications that we see is that it doesn't matter what sector you pick. The IoT becomes successful when it enables a novel revenue opportunity and business model. If I give you a historical example, Google is not in search business, even though they're the biggest search engine in the world. They're in advertising business. But search is a mechanism to get people to use their system, and then through that they basically enable this beautiful machine and business model to generate money. IoT is basically starting to go through that transition, and companies and people who find those types of business models and combination of devices, platform services, and all that, to get people to offer their data, and then based on that data, create a win-win situation for the consumer, for the user, and for other people to make money. Those are the most promising ones. To make a parallel with Nest, Nest is not in the business of thermostat or a smoke detector. They're in the business of convincing you to buy their device, which is a bunch of sensors, and allow them to collect those sensor data, and later to do interesting things with them. For example, in Austin, there is a utility company that pays $85 to anyone who installs Nest. Imagine that someone is giving rebate on my already very expensive product to consumers. Why? Because it enables them to save significant amount of money. By just, for example, in a hot day, they can, by lowering the temperature across a bunch of connected homes, by 1 degree, they don't have to go and buy expensive electricity for that hot day. So that saves them tens of millions of dollars. And they're willing to do that. That's the type of creative business model that is the winning solution, in my view, in IoT. Two particular sectors, I think, are indicating and give us signs that they're going to that direction. One is the industrial internet, which GE calls it, which is what you refer to. And it's a non-glamorous side of the IoT, but there is significant amount of money to be saved. There are a lot of capex-heavy equipment out there that they can operate a lot more efficiently. And the second one, I agree, that the smart home is also one of the biggest and fastest growing areas. And that, again, presents opportunities to let people to pay for something and at the same time to offer their data to win at the same time with the business.
Okay, perfect. So it's kind of interesting. Everybody's talking about the enterprise. We haven't had too many comments on the consumer side, which I find a little bit interesting. Maybe Mo, just a quick question. Where does the consumer side of this business end up? We've seen a lot of fuel and like other kinds of devices that track performance and health on our bodies, watches and so forth. Is there an evolution of that side of the business here?
We are seeing the evolution. If you notice, the wearable, for example, which is a segment and vertical within the IoT continuum, is evolving very quickly. And if you look at the wearables that were launched 2 years ago and the ones that were launched last year and the ones that are being launched this year, they're quite different. Each year, we're becoming a lot more connected. Connectivity is increasing. The use cases and experiences are becoming broader but simpler. Just look at the smartwatch 2 years ago and look at a smartwatch today. Things are going to the direction that enable those type of novel business models. And in wearable business, health all of a sudden is becoming that area that enables and creates those opportunities for new business models and new revenue opportunities.
So I mean, I almost have a question for you, but the one comment I think with some of those devices is the battery, and that I think actually in people's sort of user habits and sort of having to go charge, I think that seems to be a barrier on some of the adoption. And I saw this stat somewhere, and I don't have any justification for it, and I was more going to ask you. I mean, the average lifespan of somebody wearing one of those devices is a couple of months, and then it goes in a drawer. And so I guess until you figure out sort of a more sustainable either battery or other use cases, I think it's going to be interesting and kind of a novel segment, but I think it's got still some barriers to overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Battery and power consumption on all mobile devices, it has been a serious issue, and it continues to be because look at the battery. We are still using a technology that is 20 years old. It hasn't changed much, but our CPUs are getting faster, our screens are getting higher resolution and brighter, our wireless chips are getting faster and higher bandwidth, and they all demand more power. The only way we can save power is software. And to do that, it requires a lot of work. And I think if you're using tablets or smartphones, which I assume most of you do, you probably have noticed that latest generations have significantly improved on that factor. So we're making significant inroads in power consumption optimization.
Just a comment there. So I think that consumer IoT is risky and very unpredictable. I think it's because consumers are very unpredictable and their tastes are fickle, right? As I mentioned earlier, there really needs to be a value proposition before a consumer will go out and spend $80, $100 on a new device, and there better be something in it for them. And I don't necessarily know, I don't think anyone on this panel necessarily knows what that will be and which company or a device will win. We've seen a couple of smartwatches already come out. I haven't seen any of my friends, well, not many of my friends wear them. I had the Lumo back device, which was great for a little while until it kept bugging me. You're slouching, you're slouching, you're slouching. I've had a Jawbone, I've had a Fitbit, and I don't wear those anymore after 2 months for me, right? So I think that consumer IoT is very risky in a way. Honestly, I never would have thought that the thermostat would have been the, would have really driven the imagination of the consumer to go out and buy that particular device, but we all know that it's done really well. So I think that there will be winners in the consumer IoT. I don't think anyone can necessarily say where it is. If we look at, the trends towards quantified self and, the need to monitor your statistics just for, your own well-being, those are all good trends, but on the other hand, those are all very rational reasons to do something, whereas I think consumers buy because something is cool and there's a wow factor, and I think we're waiting for that, and it's kind of unpredictable.
Yeah, I totally agree. We've seen, I was talking to him earlier about the Kindle. So everybody here has heard of the Kindle, and when it came out, did you also realize there were 36 other ebook readers that also came out at the exact same time that nobody's ever heard of? How many had connected picture frames that nobody's ever heard of, and everybody thought that they had the most beautiful design, but they had no distribution. They didn't understand what problem they were genuinely trying to solve, and the business model sucked. So those are really hard problems to solve against a very, very fickle audience.
I think one comment on that. When you think about at Cisco, the way we look at the IoT consumer business is that if you look at the entire stack on the let's say the product is basically a device, a connection to something through a cell phone maybe, and a background infrastructure, a brand name, things like that. So there are areas in that business that are constant. Devices come and disappear. More devices come and disappear, and it becomes cooler and cooler and cooler. But if you look at the back-end infrastructure, the kind of the data analytics are part of that, that thing is kind of remaining constant. At the same time, and the hardware guys, because the battery is a big problem and the life is a big problem, customize hardware for each variable, that is also staying constant. So those guys are still doing okay. It's those new designs that are kind of cool today and not cool tomorrow because they are the right shade of red. That's changing. But the goal is, if you want a good business in IoT consumer space, find that areas that are constant, and the skills you develop or the capabilities you develop that should translate into future devices as well.
Perfect. Okay, great segue actually into our next topic. So we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about kind of platform and technologies that are required to have more widespread IoT adoption. And actually, I'm going to come back to you since you brought the topic up. So what are the elements holding back widespread IoT adoption? Is it architecture, protocol, security, something else?
I think the number two answers to that. Number one is it's because IoT enables new business models. If you think about that, because what happens when a business model changes? When a business model changes, the entire business that was built behind to serve X business model, CapEx for Cisco, now has to completely change. And that is a very human thing also. It's guys from the sales guys who are compensated differently now as compared to from a SaaS model as compared to a CapEx model to what your cost structure to serve a single cell phone connection is. So it's that shift, that business model shift, that's kind of holding back the adoption. And why wouldn't a company just change to tomorrow saying, hey, that's a new business model? Because I think the IoT is not big enough yet. If it was big enough today, everybody would shift. It's the art of not being too ahead of the market, but just being with the market.
So, I mean, from my standpoint, I think if you break this down, consumer side versus, let's just say, enterprise or industrial side. On the consumer side, we talked about it. I think it's it's battery. I think it's people's habits that have to change, and I think it's sort of imagination. On the industrial sort of enterprise side, like I said earlier, I think that there is adoption that's occurring. I think the thing that slows it down is the integration into the existing system. So smart grid, getting integrated, getting into each house, getting that integrated into the grid for a utility. I mean, utilities aren't moving particularly quickly. I mean, they're relative for utilities, I think they're moving quickly, but in general, utilities aren't going to be the fastest moving to adopt. And so I think when you look in healthcare, when you look at a lot of the spaces where there's a lot of value, I think that you have to just give it time for those organizations to catch up on the integration side.
I think in particular what is stopping us for IoT adoption, mass adoption, and by the way, we're in early stages. If you look at something like job on op, for example, right now an individual can go and build on a weekend, spending $100, can put together everything that job on op has, or any other activity tracker for that matter. If you wanted to do the same thing 10 years ago, it would have probably cost you tens of millions of dollars and an army of engineers to do the same thing. So we're just at the beginning of this cycle, that everything is becoming cheaper and more available. Hardware all of a sudden is democratized, and that creates a bed for innovation. And innovation will happen, but it takes time, as you suggested. But what will stop us from mass adoption, in my view, one is on the consumer side in particular, is privacy concerns, and it's the other side of the coin, right? We say that the novel business ideas and revenue streams that are mostly based on big data and analysis and collecting this data and using it. And on the other side is the consumer that they don't like to share their data unless there is a very good reason for it. So privacy is something we will get probably passed by it. We got passed by it, and we're all using webmail and everything, even though we know everything is available to people that we don't want to be available to. The other one is lack of standardization. We need to get to a level that interoperability among vendors, whether it's a device or platform, becomes a reality. But that will take time too. I don't know if you guys remember, there was a time that you could not send a text message from one carrier to another carrier. Mm-hmm. The only reason it made sense, and they started to spend money and pay Lucent and other people to make it happen, was there was revenue opportunity there. So until we get there, the standardization, it doesn't matter how many times IEEE comes up with standards or other people come up with standards, it's not going to happen. So those are two main, I think, sites.
I would say,
go ahead.
So I would say three things, and also just to complement the other guys. So BOM cost, or bill of materials, the business model, and just the sheer complexity of execution. And so BOM cost, just a small example, I joined Jasper about 7 years ago. The cost of a 3G modem at that time was about $95. The cost of a 3G modem today is about $18, $15 to $18. But the cost of a Wi-Fi chip is like $2. So we got to continue to bring it down. That's why Wi-Fi can just be proliferated into everything. But the BOM costs will have to come down. The business models have to work. I mean, it's just like, why would we do this? We have to account for the BOM cost, but what's the ROI if it's an industrial case, or what's the consumer model? How are we going to try and actually make money on this thing? And then the complexity. You know, for especially in the enterprise, if you're thinking about a multinational deployment, it's just the complexity of dealing with all the different vendors around the world, all the different languages, all the different constructs, and all the different standards. Actually, is a major barrier.
I would just add one thing. So, you know, what you've heard so far is kind of a litany of all the hurdles that are facing anyone trying to get into IoT businesses. I would say security is another thing. But I would say that it kind of depends on who you're talking to within the business. So a lot of IoT machine-to-machine solutions are deployed or implemented by product managers, operational managers. We call that kind of the operational technology folks, right? On the other hand, the people who really care about your data security are the IT folks. And they often are not engaged in that conversation when it comes to implementing those solutions, especially within enterprises. Now, the unfortunate thing is that if your operational folks or product folks are implementing something without checking to make sure that it's really secure, eventually you will have an issue. And eventually those types of security items will land on the front page of the news, right? And so I think in the future, you know, we all know that security is very important. We know that there is an organization within the company who's responsible for looking after that, but they're not always engaged in the discussion. But on the other hand, solutions are being implemented potentially without that proper security. So I think eventually we'll have some issues that become manifest over time. They'll show up in the newspaper. We'll get a knee-jerk reaction from some of the enterprises or consumers, and then suddenly security will become the #1 issue. But I think that that's something that's kind of a latent hurdle.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let me come back to the standardization comment you made, Mo. How do we get to the point of having some sort of standards or a standards body? And you know, the internet has IP, cellular has 3GPP and IETF. You know, this week you guys announced the OIC. We have a competing All-Seen Alliance, which is kind of the Qualcomm one. What happens here? How do we get to a singular point? So
I touched on it briefly. Standardization is good, but someone said that the good thing about standards is that there are too many of them. But to converge, there has to be incentives. And the incentive really comes when we pass a plateau at a trigger point that there is enough mass adoption. It's like a chicken and egg problem, unfortunately, but it happens eventually. That there's enough consumers and users out in the market that is worth for major players to actually play nice to each other. And until then, everyone is going to push their own way.
So maybe Teresa and Jeff, in the past that telcos had big roles in pushing vendors for standardization. Are you active in doing that?
We are. However, what we have found is that the standards bodies have been very slow to actually kind of finalize what those standards are intended to be. We have different groups that are converging to one into M. And so although we would like to support them, they are not moving very quickly as we'd like them to, as quickly as the industry would like them to. But I do agree with what's been said. I think that, the point of a standard is that everyone converges on that standard, everyone uses it so that everyone's devices and applications can start to talk to one another. But to your point, it's not going to happen until we show these companies the path to monetization, right? And so I think what's going to happen is that one or another of these groups, in the connected home space, we now have the Open Interconnect Consortium, we have the All Seen Alliance, we have HomeKit by Apple, and then we have Works with Nest by Google, right? So there are 4 competing consortiums. 1 or 2 of them will kind of break away, show great success, and then the other companies who want to participate in this space will probably align to one or both of those.
Yeah, I mean, a similar answer. I mean, I think Singtel is active in the discussions. I think it's early trying to figure out what the right standards or what the standards should be or will be. Everyone kind of has their opinions, but this space is not that different from every other space out there when it comes to the needs for standards and the battles that occur and the sort of tug of war that kind of occurs until somebody gets the traction. And I think that just happens in its own way. And I think figuring out the monetization path and whoever gets more of the traction first can end up driving those standards a little bit more than others. And so.
I think one thought, Cisco made its early money when the internet was just kind of coming together by taking these different protocols and translating them to IP and connecting them. So actually, from that perspective, till we get it standardized, there's actually a huge opportunity for startups to come and create that abstraction layer so the developers can develop applications better. So my thing is that right now what we need is not as much standardization because the market is still evolving. It's more APIs and just abstraction layers so anybody can come and develop new applications and just kind of combine them. Now once it kind of plateaus, to your point, Mo, then I think there will be a need for standardization because something else will be threatening IoT.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about kind of the big data opportunity as it relates to this space. What role will the telcos have in the cloud stack, so to speak? Will it be kind of just data normalization? Will it be going all the way up to the application? What's the right role here for the telco?
Well, so if the first question is what role are telcos looking to play, and I think telcos are, or at least what I've observed so far, is that they're very ambitious in this space. And this is a space where I think they see the opportunity to potentially play all throughout the stack. And whether it's with partners at certain layers or not, I think they see an opportunity. All telcos don't want to become sort of the proverbial dumb pipe and see opportunity in this space to leverage a place where they feel like they have the right to play. And I think they're going to try and play potentially all the way up the stack, depending on which country, region, and carrier. But I think they'll play. I think they'll attempt to play, and they may get back down from being able to play in some of the spaces. But I think the ambitions are pretty significant.
Yeah, I would agree. But what I would say is that what's unique about the telcos is that at least for cellularly connected devices, we're already in the data path. We're already carrying the data traffic back to the cloud or back to the data centers. And so it does make sense for carriers to kind of extend up, right? As many of you guys know, Verizon acquired Terramark Cloud. We're starting to build up a data analytics team. So it makes sense on the one hand for us to be able to kind of move up that value stack to participate in a greater proportion out of that Internet of Things. But what I would also say is that what's most important to the enterprises, I think, is that, as we had all mentioned, there's a lot of hurdles to actually deploying any IoT solution. What the enterprises need is simplicity, one-stop shop, one throat to choke, So whomever provides that, regardless of whether or not it's a carrier or an SI or some other company, is probably the one who's going to be able to win that enterprise business, because you can decouple, your connectivity from your cloud compute and store, from your data normalization, and so on. And so I think that there's an opportunity for someone to go in to be able to provide that one-stop shop. However, it does make sense for telcos to kind of move up that stack. And for Verizon anyway, we certainly have a lot of the assets to start moving in that direction.
100% agree. The enterprises just want their problem solved. And I think we've reached, we're past the sort of visionary stage. We're getting that sort of early mainstream on the adoption curve. And these guys already have relationships with the AT&Ts and the Verizons. I mean, every company of a reasonable size has a telco provider today. And that's a great channel for them to be able to sell additional services. Where I've seen telcos go wrong is if they think they can build everything themselves and build all the applications and build all the services. I think very famously Orange tried to do that in Europe and flopped miserably. And so what we've seen is a much more openness to just partner with solution providers. Maybe some smaller companies. That Coca-Cola is not going to go buy from a 50-person shop, 100-person shop, but they'll certainly buy from Verizon, from AT&T, which may be fronting that 50-person shop of specialists who actually know this business really, really well. And I think it's a great play for them. It's not that, I don't know that AT&T and Verizon and these guys are going to be the dominant players for every single market. They can certainly get a pretty good fair share.
I have a little kind of a different view from my carrier colleagues here. And the reason is big data needs big data. And to get big data, you need a lot of users and a lot of exposure. And even the largest carriers in the world, they don't come even close to some other big data companies that we know, the 2, 3, 4 major ones globally, that they have that access. And they're years ahead of the game. So I don't think carriers, it would be a good ROI for them to get to the big data part of the stack. The real opportunity for operators, right, the way I see it in IoT, is we're again moving through a transformation of carriers' business. We saw it when voice was transformed, and VoIP posed a very serious threat to operators' business. And very understandably, they were hesitant to get on the VoIP bandwagon because it would cannibalize their own main voice business. IoT is kind of the same transition, but it doesn't have the cannibalization issue. These are all brand new blue ocean stuff that the pie is getting bigger. So I think carriers, they have a great opportunity to provide very, very cost-effective connectivity to these billions of devices that are going to go online. And the problem with cellular is the economics of cellular, because of the cost of the spectrum and all the expensive machinery and the technology that has been built for cellular. See, the cellular technology is based on, if you look at the cell, each cell is 3 sectors or some number of sectors. And each sector can serve 20, 30, tens of basically users at the same time, but relatively high bandwidth. IoT nodes, or if you will, clients, they are a lot larger in numbers, but they require a very small amount of bandwidth. We're talking about 100 bit per second or 150 bit per second. So that requires a change in infrastructure, an adaptation to this new need to change the economy of delivering this bandwidth. And I think some smart carriers are trying to invest in that. A good example is a French carrier that is coming to San Francisco, and they're building a network based on 915 megahertz. It's an unlicensed band. It's called, I think, Sigfox. And this is a $1 per year subscription. So if you have a dog and your dog has an activity tracker that you need cellular wireless, you're not going to pay $35 for data connectivity. But $1 a year, maybe. So I think that's the opportunity that exists.
I want to kind of step back. I mean, why are we talking about big data? Right? I mean, big data is the buzzword, right? But in reality, big data and IoT, basically what they mean is these things generate lots of data. This data goes into a process. That process basically is looked at by a few people. People look at it and say, oh, we can solve a problem with this, right? So it's things, data, people, processes. So at the end of the day, it's about solving a problem, right? And when I look at the opportunity with telcos, there are a huge number of these IoT and big data opportunities that are about the distributed data analysis. A mining truck, which is about the wheel is 10 times my height, right? That thing generates about hundreds of megabits of data per day, and it's out in South Africa in a mine with no cell phone coverage, right? But the value is that, but if you have a leased line going to that thing, and you can process most of data right there, now that makes sense. So there's a term we call it the point of presence, POP. So if you have a lot of points of presence, there's a huge opportunity of leveraging just that infrastructure to be very smart about it. The paradigm we look at, it's not about data, huge amounts of data waiting to be queried. It's about a query waiting for a data. So think about that. There's a question hanging there. It's waiting for the truck to say, oh, the temperature is too hot. Then it does something. It's not about taking the truck's temperature data for the entire day, analyzing whether it was hot or not. So it's changing the paradigm of how data analysis is. It's about a query waiting for a data point. So that's where the huge opportunity for telcos is.
Okay. So I guess that's, this is the notion of the fog-like environment that Cisco touts. I'm curious to understand other people's perspective on what's the value of local processing versus hauling it all the way back, centrally processed, and then providing that value to enterprises or consumers. Is there a trade-off there, or is that the right architecture?
Yeah, I'll start. So I'll give you kudos. I mean, Cisco Fog, definitely very, very appealing, And I have to be careful about this because Fog basically says I can do all my analytics locally, and therefore I don't need to use the cellular transport, right? That's what it says. But I mean, I would say that depending on the use case, there is absolutely a need for local processing. The benefit of local processing is no latency or low latency, as well as resiliency. If for whatever reason your connection goes down, you can still actually do something with that data locally. And then cost, right? Because you don't necessarily need to pay for the transport back to your cloud or your central servers, what have you. The use cases that I like to think about are, for example, your car, the automobiles that today have lane departure alerts, right? What happens is that there are cameras on the front of your car that take pictures and evaluate and analyze what it sees in front of it. If it sees a straight line, it has to figure out, is that a lane on the street or is that the side of a building? It needs to do all of that analysis locally in real time, heavy-duty processing, and then immediately send a alert to the customer. I don't know if it's sound or I don't have that, but it needs to immediately react to be able to tell the customer on a timely basis. You can't do that by always having to go back to the cloud. So I mean, I think that there's value in it. But on the other hand, as long as we are connecting all of these devices, and I think that's another question that you had, right? Today, the automobiles, airplanes, they create a ton of data. Very little is being collected today. But on the other hand, if you had a way to tap into that device and you want to see what that car is doing because you've never had access to that data before or as much of it, why wouldn't you pull it just to do some data discovery, right? Because I think that we haven't figured out all the uses of the data that will be generated by all the connected machines that will come to fruition over time. I think about, I think it was Ford that actually decided to open up some of their APIs and share data about when and where a vehicle was when their windshield wipers went on, right? Who cares about that data? The Weather Channel, Weather Underground, right? Because now they know exactly, okay, all of these cars have just turned on their windshield wipers. So therefore, you kind of can figure out the rain frontier of where a storm is occurring to a far more precise level than you ever had before, right?
Or a dirty road.
Or a dirty road, right? Exactly. So, I mean, I don't think that we have figured out what to do with this data. I think that there's vast amount of data discovery that needs to occur, pattern discovery that needs to occur. So, I think on the one hand, there's absolutely a place for kind of the local processing as opposed to central processing. But I also think that, just because you do a lot of the local processing doesn't mean that you don't grab that data and try to do something with it. But it does mean that you do just try to be more sensitive to what exactly your use case is and only grab that data for what you need to do and need to evaluate.
So, there's no absolutes here. I think you're making a good point, and I'll try and sort of punctuate that a little bit. There's a ton of garbage that gets created with the data, and there's a lot of data that never needs to be used, and there's a lot of data that needs to be analyzed. And I think doing the analytics at the edge makes a lot of sense in terms of efficiency and cost and everything else that goes with it. But I guess on the other side, the case you're making is you don't, or maybe I'll make, is you don't necessarily know which data you need for all circumstances. You take the plane that got lost. Nobody necessarily thought they needed all that data, but it would have been nice to have if you were collecting it. And so, but I do think ultimately, though, just from the efficiency and everything else, that the capability of doing a real-time analytics at the edge is a tremendous value. And it is more likely to be the base case, and the data getting sent to the back end, in mass is probably more the exception.
Yeah, agreed. There's a large car manufacturer that we work with who's basically built this in, and they do all that complex processing in terms of how the engine is performing, how the driver is behaving, and information that will help them basically build better product that they don't collect. They have it there, and it's stored, and they can go collect it whenever they want. And then they can actually rewrite what other information they want to collect because of the onboard diagnostic unit is a standard. So so they can collect it any time that they want. So they've architected that in, but they're not ready for it yet. They're probably not ready for another 2 or 3 years to their own admission. But particularly with a product lifecycle that is 4 years of development and 10 years of life, they have to build that in for future use.
The other angle that I briefly touched on is privacy. And I think fog versus cloud is kind of looking like to provide some solution to this issue. Most people will be hesitant. There will be stories that how data was abused and misused and all that, and people will become hesitant more and more to share their data in the coming years. At the same time, a lot of these business models are built assuming that the data is there. So fog allows some sense of kind of hybrid model that I, as a user, I own my data. When I generate it, I choose what to share to the cloud if I see enough benefits and if I see that I want to be compared to the, a billion other people in terms of my heart condition. So that is creating an opportunity for a lot of you guys, entrepreneurs. Things like if I keep my data on my premises, but I want to analyze it, I need algorithms. So algorithms as a service will become all of a sudden an opportunity that you just lease your algorithm to some users to do certain things. And this kind of double-edged balance between should I send my data to the cloud or should I keep it and locally process it is going to create a lot of opportunities.
Okay, so let's switch to protocols and connectivity. What's going to be the dominant form here? Is it Wi-Fi? Is it cellular? Is it something else? And what's the impact on the telco? We will start with Teresa.
Okay. So, I think a lot of people have different numbers, different predictions, but our estimate would be that 75% of the IoT will not be on cellular, right? It'll be on some other alternate type of connectivity, whether it's wireline, Wi-Fi, Zigbee, Bluetooth low energy, so on and so forth, right? So, obviously, telcos have a lot of interest in trying to promote cellular connectivity, and there are benefits to that, but there are also costs associated with that. And cellular does not necessarily fit each and every use case. So, Wi-Fi being as proliferated as it is, the low cost is obviously a very good choice, not to mention that the standards have evolved quite a bit in order to adapt to the needs of the companies who want to do something with it, right? There was Wi-Fi A and B, and it's getting faster and faster, but you also have developments in low power Wi-Fi and then Wi-Fi mesh, right? So Wi-Fi is evolving very quickly in order to try to meet the needs of Internet of Things, as well as any other use cases as they apply. On the other hand, when you use Wi-Fi, you're not necessarily in control. You as the enterprise are not necessarily in control of your connectivity. You are beholden to whatever local connectivity exists. And if your machine is connected to Wi-Fi, but for whatever reason that Wi-Fi goes down and your machine does not reconnect to that Wi-Fi, then all of a sudden you, as the, it's the vending machine connected to a building's Wi-Fi, you no longer have visibility to that machine. And that's a big concern for a lot of these customers. If you as an enterprise have invested all this money in connecting that vending machine to be able to do point of sale transactions, credit card transactions, then it's important for you to constantly stay connected to that. And there are risks with going with Wi-Fi or any of the other technologies. So, there's a cost-benefit analysis, but I would say that, probably the majority of the IoT will not be on cellular. The question is, where then how then can telcos participate if it's not on cellular? And that's when we talk about trying to move up the value stack, right? So we at Verizon, would talk about our Terramark Cloud, cyber trust security and identity, as well as just trying to support customers in terms of their connectivity needs, because really carriers do have vast majority of the RF engineers in the United States, regardless of whether or not it's one type of connectivity or another. So we can still try to support our customers, but on the other hand, where we make our money is cellular plus cloud and some of the other assets that we may have internally, depending on the carrier.
We have clearly Wi-Fi is going to be a majority, but Wi-Fi is not free, and I think that's the common misperception is that it's just simply free bandwidth. I'll just let somebody go configure it. Konica Minolta is one of the enterprises on our platform. They embed connectivity inside of their copier machines, and it's for remote support and be able to change their business model, basically providing copier as a service. They actually did a very detailed analysis, because you can imagine every copier that they sell in the world is in a business environment. So even if there's not Wi-Fi, there's fixed line, you just plug it right into the Ethernet. Why wouldn't they just do that? And effectively, it's free. But what they found was that they were now beholden to every single one of their customers' IT systems. They have to go in and ask their customer to allow Konica Minolta to punch a hole in the firewall. Whenever something changed, whenever the local help desk team made some configuration change, they were completely cut off. And they actually had to call their customer to help do tech support for them. And they found that just embedding a cellular modem inside of that copier machine that the customer didn't have to do anything with, and they just power on the machine and everything just works out of the box, gives them always available control, was valuable for them. And it actually turned out to be a lower cost structure than the support costs associated with Wi-Fi. I would also add, if you're going to go international, it's the proliferation of Wi-Fi, particularly here in the US and in places like the UK, is really strong. You go to other parts of the world, not nearly as strong. And so you want to find something that is going to be available everywhere you want to go.
I agree. I think at the end of the day, cost is going to drive the choice for connectivity. And the cost is not just the cost that you pay for connectivity, it's the opportunity cost and all other costs associated if it's a mission critical issue. But for consumers, that's where I have most visibility. It looks like that because of the smartphone, and that's really the main driver for it. We have two types of connectivity requirements for IoT. One is state exchange, which is low bandwidth, very quick, just a few milliseconds of data transfer, and one content, which is streaming and doing other stuff, which requires much higher bandwidth. For state, BLE is looking pretty good, and I think in a short period of time, that's 3-4 years, it will probably capture most of the proximity level communication and all other standards. They will have a role to play. We will have a hybrid world, but BLE is going to be the major player. For the other type of connectivity, which is content and higher bandwidth, Wi-Fi provides the best economics at this point, and it's because scale, and scale translates to lower cost.
I mean, a lot has already been covered on what I'd say, but I mean, the only thing I'd just add is, it's also the cost of, whether it's multi-mode, the cost of the BOM, as you talked about, you're going to add a cellular modem, you're going to add Wi-Fi. I mean, so then you start getting into costs of these Internet of Things sensors, and depending on your use case, becomes a little bit more of a challenge or a question as to which way to go. But again, ultimately, I think Wi-Fi is certainly the leading choice right now, and probably for the foreseeable future. I think there's a lot of people trying a lot of different technologies, and I think there's also you can not just use LTE, you can actually go back and use maybe 2G or even 3G in certain places to actually change the dynamics in terms of what that means to a carrier as well. So
I think there are really good points. I think the one thing I would say is think of Wi-Fi and cellular not being two different things. They're essentially merging. Because what's going to happen is it's going to be one provider who provides a managed connection. And when you're in Wi-Fi zone, you switch to Wi-Fi because all the phones, the modem that has Wi-Fi and cellular is not that expensive anymore. So I think we have a solution we call it SP Wi-Fi or telco Wi-Fi, right? Which is basically if you're on a phone and you come in a zone where there is Wi-Fi, you automatically switch your cell phone to Wi-Fi, so that the telco doesn't have to pay the extra data hauling costs on the cellular connection. So I think it's heading towards the merger of the two, and the question is when, and that's not an easy answer.
But I mean, you're right. I mean, carriers are using Wi-Fi offload today.
Yep, that's right.
But
Okay,
you still
good.
pay for that. It's cheaper.
Yeah.
But if you're going to go Wi-Fi offload on the AT&T network at Starbucks,
Yep.
you can't just go get that for free, right?
Absolutely.
That's, as if you're an enterprise is building it into your product, right?
It's cheaper for the carrier.
It's cheaper for the carrier, and they will give you incentives to do that. But certainly it's not totally free.
Right.
In fact, if your wired connection is more expensive, then Wi-Fi is more expensive, which is in the developing economies.
Sure.
Right,
Yeah,
but in
that's
developed
true.
economies,
That's exactly
Today,
right.
yeah.
And
actually
LATAM,
it's
that's right.
cheaper, right?
Yeah, wired is a lot more expensive in LATAM.
people still copper wires, right?
Yeah.
So.
Okay, let's switch topics to our last kind of bucket around the value of IoT. I think there's kind of two big buckets of that. One of which is operational gains, operational efficiency, largely talking about enterprise and maybe linked to big data. And the other is kind of enhanced consumer experience. Maybe you guys can talk a little bit about either or both of those and really what the long-term value of IoT is. We'll start here.
I think so. I think the question is which one is more important?
Which one is more important, and how do you communicate that? How will that evolve in the IoT world? How do you communicate that to customers? How do you sell?
Yeah, I think so it's easy. I think we talked about that it's easier to justify the enterprise IoT today. But that doesn't mean that that's going to be the only money maker, right? Because I think experience as kind of a large cell phone company in the Bay Area has proven that experience can actually make company the largest, highest market cap company in the world, right? So that the key is how do you, for the consumer IoT, how do you put a dollar amount on experience and know that somebody's going to be willing to pay $400 for a certain experience? That's a lot harder to do, but if you do it, you'll probably make a few $1 billion like Nest did. I think that's what the consumer IoT is. Enterprise IoT is a lot simpler, but the difference is whatever solution you provide to enterprise IoT, it has to last like 10 years. I mean, literally, if it cost you more to actually support it for 10 years, then you're still in that business. You lose money, but you still have to support for 10 years. So those are the pros and cons.
Okay. I would say that the history of machine-to-machine and IoT has started with operational efficiency. How do you save money? And I think that we're starting to see a lot more use cases and business models where companies are trying new business models on in order to make money, right? And so these are the new business models like user-based insurance, which Progressive offers already today, which is, I'm going to give you this black box, you connect it to your automobile, and I'm going to track your behavior for 6 months, and after that, I am going to hopefully give you a lower insurance rate for your automobile, which is great. It's a different business model that Progressive is trying out, right? And I think that companies are starting to experiment with those in order to try to gain market share, to try to do something new and different. And I really think that's what IoT, I think it was to your point earlier, will enable. That's kind of new and different. The convergence of all the information, the availability of that information, be able to track your actual usage. I think you were talking about that mining vehicle company. Some of those same construction vehicle companies are going out, and instead of you having a business model where a company comes in and pays $100,000 for a machine once every 10 years, instead have the enterprise pay for each hour of actual usage. So converting from a CapEx model into an OpEx model. And I think we're starting to see a lot more of that. I would say that the other thing about IoT, particularly on the consumer side, is it'll enable new user experiences. So for all of you entrepreneurs out there, what I would personally love to see is the application that allows me to tell my son that your Wii is going to be locked until you submit your homework electronically, right? So and I think that's one of the hurdles with the IoT, because a lot of what you see, whether it's enterprise side or consumer side, are point solutions, right? Meanwhile, the pain points that consumers actually have kind of fall in between the two, or they're at the intersection of a couple of those. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. Being able to create and solve some of those customer issues that we actually have is going to require a lot of partnership and ecosystem development.
So I think it starts with, as you said, productivity, and I think simply the collection and delivery of data. But where I think the space needs to go, and for the real value, has to be more the predictive value and the correlation of data and the cross correlation among sensors. And so, I think there's ultimately the value, and maybe it's just the bar. The bar will continuously move. It's maybe not set there today. Today, there's plenty of room and operational efficiencies that can be gained, but those will quickly be taken out of the equation, and then you'll have to keep going deeper and deeper into more of the heavier analytics and the predictive analytics. And I think that's ultimately where the value goes, though, is the management and the correlation of the data.
The most successful deployments we've seen all have one common theme, is that the company understands that the Internet of Things is not about things, but it's about service. And when they start with that, and they work backwards, and then figure out the thing, but they start with what is the service we want to provide, whether it is operational efficiency, whether it is a new business model, it's really a service-based business that they're building, and the things are a means to an end to accomplish that. And that's the one common theme we've seen across successful enterprises.
I agree. I think this move from CapEx-driven business to OpEx-driven business is going to be big. And you don't have to go way too far to do that. Today, people can go, and some people are doing this, can go and turn Nest purchase by a user that they have to self-install it and then configure it and all that into a business. They go and install it, and they actually amortize it over a few years, and they turn a $250 purchase plus installation into $10 a month or whatever monthly payment. That on its own is a business. It's turning OpEx to CapEx business. And these are the things that will be, we're going to see more and more of them. That's one side of the business, that you kind of package a service. The other side is what I touched on earlier, that if you want to capture value out of IoT, as an entrepreneur, as a technologist, as a startup, as a large company, the way to do it, it's all about big data at the end of the day. Data will enable revenue models. And you need somehow to offer some value to a large number of users to accept your little box that has a bunch of sensors and is connected. But it poses a scenario that people are willing to go and pay for it and install it in their office or car or home to allow you to collect the data and then share that winning scenario with them. And we have a recipe that it works. And Nest is, I think, a great recipe that exactly is doing that. And we're going to see a lot more of that.
Okay, 2 more questions, and then we'll start taking questions from the audience. I want to probe a little bit on privacy. So we talked a little bit about this. Is it the situation where we're just going to end up having to kind of suck it up and say that's the world we live in? Or is there an ability to give the power to the consumer or user to turn on and off the data that's transmitted to the rest of the world? Where will we end up here?
I think today actually is pretty interesting that when you buy a Jawbone app or what used to be Nike Fuel band, you give all your data and you can't take it out. It's kind of a very weird paradigm. It's like they know what you do, where you go when you sleep, how much you sleep, how much you turn while you're sleeping, but they don't give it back to you. So leave alone privacy, I want my data back. And I want to be able to combine with 5 different things that I use, and then with the map I run on my cell phone, and we will combine that. That is not there. So I think I would actually say there's a bigger problem there. Somebody's taking my data and just storing it.
Yeah, I think ultimately that this leads to a little bit of a backlash. Maybe I'm just the old guy type of thing, but I think there's already been use cases where people are wearing their quantified self devices to sleep or not to sleep or whatever you want to call it, but evidence of what they do in the bed, and so I think those are crossing the line. That people aren't comfortable with, and I think you'll see that more and more. I think Facebook is one thing where you're sharing your life and you're choosing what's being shared. I think these these devices that are just passively collecting all of your activities is going to lead to behaviors by others that will exploit it. And I think ultimately, if something's not put in place, it'll actually be the major hindrance, I think, as other people mentioned today in the adoption of the space.
Well, wouldn't the market fix that? I choose to buy the band, and I can choose to turn it off. I can choose, and if Fitbit starts getting so much backlash, they'll adjust in some way. I think I don't know. It feels like we're in 1997. So do you think anybody would actually accept cookies? It's like now it's just we're just tracked everywhere already, and we just become numb to it. I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit more of a cynic. I think it's just inevitable.
I think that there's been a change in how accepting our culture is of sharing your own data, and I think a lot of it has to do with the millennial generation. I read some studies where the millennial generation just assumes that there is surveillance. Someone's watching what they're doing, which is in part why some of these applications, which are anonymous, are taking off, right? Vine, I think, is one of them, right? Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Sorry, I'm just very tired. And so I think, so I think that, I think that there is slowly a change in terms of our attitudes towards privacy and sharing of information. However, I'm a pretty firm believer that there has to be some kind of exchange of value, which is to say, I'm willing to give you my data, but only if you're willing to give me coupon or free Google Maps, right? Or some other benefit or product. To your point, it is a matter of the customer choosing whether or not to buy your product or to use your product in exchange for sharing their own data. So I would like to think that is how it's going to happen, and that voters can decide, I guess with their thumbs, about when and how they share data. And I think the onus is on enterprises to kind of figure out how to make sure that consumers' privacy are protected, that how they're going to use the data is pretty transparent. Customers have an option of whether to opt in or opt out, and whether or not they want to participate.
I agree with most of what you said.
Okay. So my last question, given so many entrepreneurs are in the audience, where are the places for that are ripe for startups? Where's the disruption opportunity? Start with you.
I think the two things I already mentioned, and one was this whole concept of fog, is to make it easy for developers to be able to talk to things and processes and coming up with enabling new business models, but opening it up to an application developer community, not the networking guy or the hardware guy, all of that. That's number one, right? And the second part is this whole enterprise industrial segment where people still don't know what HTML5 is, or they know, but that's something they use for browsing, not for application development. So just openly connecting this industrial world to this new web technologies is a huge number of problems to be solved there.
I would say that there are going to be opportunities in security, analytics, and data visualization, certainly. I mean, once you actually collect the data, what in the world do you do with all of that, right? I would also encourage you to just, I think someone else had said it, IoT is an enabler, right? When you combine that enabler with your understanding about a given vertical or a given pain point that you may have experienced or that you want to solve, then you can go and create new businesses that provide value to those consumers. But I mean, I think that IoT is so nascent, it's so wide open, there's a lot of room for innovation.
Yeah, I think it is wide open, and I think that's actually the excitement around the space. And I think there's lots of opportunity. A lot of it's already been mentioned. The areas that I think are personally the most exciting are around the security, which I think is something that's going to have to be solved. Right now, I think a lot of the sensors are just basically backdoors into people's personal data as well as corporate data, and I don't think it's been solved well yet. I think there's a lot of garbage that gets created, people that can go actually help with the analytics to actually sort out that data and make it intelligent, and also cross-correlating it across multiple different types of sensors. I think those are just a couple of the areas that I think are pretty exciting.
Analytics for sure, security for sure. And on the vertical side, manufacturing and the industrial use cases, massive amount of companies, extremely untapped, and these guys spend a lot on IT systems. Just a small improvement in efficiency gains can be real big money for them.
I think definitely algorithms and analytics are on top on my list, but also health. This is something that we saw in the last 2-3 years, that there is a lot of mass interest in anything that is even remotely promises to improve your health. Some people have more than one activity trackers and they never use them, but they have them just to feel good and feel better. So health is a major area that if you actually can, I don't know what your field of study is, but if you can non-invasively build a sensor that measures blood sugar, or if you can measure blood pressure very easily by just wearing something. Those type of applications are the ones that are going to be the very successful ventures that are going to come out.
Great. Okay, thanks. So any questions from the audience? I think that would be a good time. Yeah, if you could stand up into the mic, that'd be good.
Hi. Yeah, I'm an engineer. I'm just on the engineering side, and I've worked for a couple of IoT companies. I worked for Pebble, and I also worked for this company Scanadu, and they're doing a device that you hold to your forehead and get some biometrics. I kind of feel like healthcare was a little undersold, maybe because I'm in that space. But I think the question I have is, don't you see an opportunity for the ROI that can occur by stopping a emergency room visit? Like my son got bit by a bug, and all they did in the hospital waiting room was measure his SpO2, which plenty of devices can do. But a consumer reading a thermometer or anything like that is a lot less reliable than connecting that device to the internet and going direct to the doctor. So can't the consumer space be driven through the ROI that comes from, let's call it, a medical vertical?
Yeah, I think there's the impact is profound. We've had a lot of companies attempt to do similar things, whether they're connected glucometers. We had this wonderful company called Vitality, a connected prescription pill box. Make sure grandpa's taking his prescription, and you notify him and remind him and notify the children if he's not. The problem with a lot of these companies, the things that they're facing is regulatory challenges and the business models. It's like who pays? How do you get a consumer to want to pay for that? And if you can't, can you get the insurer to pay for that? Can you get the hospital to want to pay for that? And do they loan it out? And they just, these smaller companies just crumbled under the weight of the complexity of all of that. It's some wonderful ideas, and it all makes sense, but I think people really struggle with the business model and the regulatory environment.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of what we've seen as well. So, I mean, it's a labyrinth of an ecosystem that has to exist in the healthcare system. So trying to figure out who's actually going to pay is a huge question. And then the regulatory burdens and approval and certification processes are very, very complicated.
If you have questions, I think we'll just line up behind.
Hi, just came back from a meeting with Google today, and they talk about wearable and Google Glass and so on. And they mentioned one of the most popular app category there is sports related, such as things to improve your golf swing, warn you about where you are on the golf link and so on and so forth. And I haven't heard that mentioned at all today. I just wonder if this is just Google's perspective or where does that fit?
The question is whether Google Glass using for improving a golf swing, those kind of things, are they important or not?
Is that possible? I haven't heard that as a business opportunity at all here.
So I think I had an opportunity to talk to a startup that actually does a similar thing, a Google Glass kind of thing. But I think the real opportunity there is doing dangerous jobs where you need to be hands-free. Mm-hmm. Fixing a machine in an oil well, trying to put a drill bit in, those things. And these glasses are really geeky, right? But you're not wearing them outside work. When you go home, you take them off, right? So I think that's where the real opportunity is.
Yeah, I would say that, I would echo his comments. I would also say, though, that, the Google Glass, now, having said that, I haven't tried it, you're going to see a whole bunch of little niche applications come together, and that makes a success story. But trying to create any one of them, it will be tough because you'll have a smaller audience. There's a wearable company that makes ski goggles that will actually show you through augmented reality kind of where you are within the resort, how high you are, how fast you went, and so on. And we'll be able to record, let's just say, that actual run down the slope. Now, having said that, that's a niche, right? So, I mean, I think that there are good use cases. However, it could be kind of niche, and I think that we still need to kind of see the traction of it. And frankly, for all wearables, right, there's a question of whether or not you want other people to know that you actually have a wearable, right? So I think Sunny Vu of Misfit talks a little bit about the fact that you don't really necessarily want everyone to know that you're wearing it, right? And so that's why the Misfit Shine is, rather subtle. When you're wearing Google Glass, we've heard all about the, G holes. And so, I mean, I'm not necessarily sure that culturally, socially, we're to that point where Google Glass is so acceptable that it's welcome in all areas. But I do think that for niche use cases, it'll be very popular. But the question is, are customers willing to purchase the Google Glass for one or a few of those niche use cases? I may be wrong, and I would love to be wrong, but
I agree with you. I mean, I agree with you entirely. I mean, I think there'll be some really cool things that come about. We just don't know what they are, and they may be niche cases, and so I think you're right.
Okay, next question.
Alec Dare Abrams, UC Berkeley. This is a question about maybe standardization or just commonality of platform, not necessarily at the protocol level, but at least as well as going up the stack to APIs, maybe even data schema. Teresa mentioned the valuable notion of an ecosystem that's yet to be developed here. a particularly important component of that is third-party developers who will find all those applications that where it makes sense to connect up your car charger with your toothbrush. I mean, who knows? If we look back over the opening up of the PC architecture way back in the 80s, the development of the internet itself with low-level protocols that have really stood the test of time, not just TCP, but HTTP on top of it, that third parties have developed marvelous applications for, Google included, when they were a small third party. And we have the experience of WAP not going anywhere for a good long time. And then iOS and Android coming along and really opening up marketplaces. So there's the notion of kind of commonality, standardization, whether it's de facto, de jure, big gorilla kind of standardization. And for IoT, maybe this is a question for Pavan and the guy from Qualcomm that couldn't come and the guy from GE that couldn't come. What kind of type of commonality seeking is the best way to approach it that the current big gorillas could probably provide for not just partnering with their sort of siloed partners, but really building up that ecosystem that Teresa was talking about, so the third parties out here can really participate on this little playing field with the big gorillas looking on.
So I'll answer a question with a different spin on it. Kind of the Clayton Christensen spin that a lot of the big companies respond to disruptions. They don't respond to opportunities as well. So I think what you're talking about, and as we talked about, the big business is including that abstraction layer. So all these multiple alliances are actually not that important. Because one guy comes in and says, I have customers, all of them. And we work with a lot of companies on that perspective. So to me, actually, it's a disruption waiting to happen.
I mean, that platform layer, I mean, we've invested in a company I mentioned earlier called Neura that is trying to connect to the different devices and create a platform that people can build upon. And so I mean, again, I think that's an exciting area, and we'll see how that develops.
Standardization, as I touched on, it's going to take time. There has to be incentives, but that doesn't mean there are no opportunities. Like there are a bunch of people, again, looking at the consumer space, like Revolve or SmartThings, or those people, they're actually taking advantage of the fact that there are no standards. And they're building boxes or platforms that they bridge across all of these different variety of protocols or devices or mediums. So until that happens, those are all opportunities.
It's a tough business, though, because unlike the phone business, unlike the PC business, the form factors differ so radically, and the applications differ so radically. You can't say, how can I make sure that light bulb is going to be treated the same way as my smart meter is treated the same way as the electric car charger? And they're all the same, right? It's all IoT, but the reality, it's not. I was talking with somebody at Oracle, and they're like, Java's going to be it's going to be embedded in every single device. It's like, well, that's way too heavy for a lot of devices. Today, I did a quick scan. This was a little while ago, but there were, we had about 1,000 enterprises on our platform today, and about 895 of them had different proprietary operating systems. So there's no commonality yet. For as much as we see in the press about HomeKit and that kind of stuff, the reality is in today's market, it's so very, very fragmented. So we got a long way to go.
Next question.
Hi, this is Mei Huang from Spiron Communications. So this is a question around what do you see as the changes or the evolution in the network elements that enable this M2M networks? For example, we talked about pushing more intelligence to the edge devices, which may likely function as the multi-service gateway as well, right? So we're seeing different configuration of these network elements on the edges and all the way into the data core.
I can give a theoretical answer.
Please.
Because we think about architectures, right? I think there is multiple things. A couple of years back, it was about all the control plane being able to handle all the chatter, because the data part of a message wasn't that big enough, but there were too many messages, right? That's number one. Second was trying to do local profiles as well as pinging the mobile core every time. Those are the things that are very interesting. And then we talked about how do you optimize an application to leverage your small compute at the edge, but then also leverage your huge compute in the back end.
We see, and it's still too small yet to make a huge difference, but we see it heading that way. Signaling is a big burden on the network. So for those not too familiar with cellular signals, just being able to have that radio wave reach out from the phone and try and attach to the network itself. So even if you're not sending a lot, every time that device is even powered up in any way, shape, or form, even if you're not in a data session, it's still signaling. So suddenly you're putting millions and millions and millions of more signaling a burden on the network with no incremental revenue to the operator to fulfill that. And we see that the devices, because they're not built by the 4 or 5 phone companies who know how to build cellular devices, they're built by a lot of people who just don't come from that world, are built very poorly. And the one hiccup they see in the mobile network, suddenly they go berserk and they can really take down the network, surprisingly enough, with just the amount of abusive behavior that we see. So we're actually working with the GSMA to try and help solve for that through standards.
I would agree with the comments made. I would also add that one of my concerns in terms of the infrastructure is really not just the network infrastructure, but also the customer's infrastructure. So there was one customer who had a bunch of devices go down for whatever reason. And what happened is that they could not reconnect. Those devices could not reconnect to the network, to their backend service. And what was happening was that because a bunch of devices had gone down all at once, they just had each of those devices ping their central servers as soon as it woke up. And you had so many devices pinging their backend servers that there was just too much traffic and none of them could connect. There are a lot of rejects. And so it's not just what can the carrier do, but also how is this solution being architected? How is the enterprise's infrastructure being architected and designed in order to handle these thousands of devices that will exist out in the market?
Well, one common thing we like to say is machines, they never get bored and they never tire. So they can just keep going on and on and on and on and on.
One other driver for pushing the intelligence to the edge even further and further in the context of IoT is the volume of data. I think someone touched on it. There is a lot of garbage that is being created that we don't need to ship it up to some server and process it and figure out that we don't need it. The time resolution of data collection. For certain applications, we need every 10 minutes. For certain applications, we need every second. So we don't have to send everything everywhere. For those reasons, it will make a lot of sense, and it does even today, to do a lot of edge processing and send a little more processed data to the server, which is expensive because there is the economic of transporting it upstream.
Okay, looks like 3 more questions. We'll try and get to them, but we'll try and be brief.
Thanks, guys. Good discussions. My name is Ben Wild. I'm a co-founder of IoTerra. We're an Internet of Things wireless company in Redwood City. Basically, what we're doing next week, we're actually going to start building out the first free nationwide network for connecting consumer Internet of Things devices to the Internet with no monthly service fees. We actually have a Facebook page, www.getiota.com. Sorry for the promotion, but now I'll get to the point. So a lot of like wearables and smartwatches today, they're connecting over Bluetooth, personal area networks. Obviously, they can't have cellular connectivity built in because of the power consumption and the cost. But I would see probably in about 3 to 5 years, the cost and the battery consumption will go low enough and the size will be small enough to where those could have cellular connectivity. Where you don't really need like your smartphone to be with you to connect. And I'm wondering, obviously there are applications like glucose meters and stuff where that makes sense, but do you see like the Fitbits and the smartwatches ever like connecting directly to the cellular network once that happens?
Absolutely. I think there are certain aspects of having always-on connectivity that will convince people, at least a segment of the market, to pay for subscription and monthly fee. And you're going to see, even at wearable level, cellular connectivity embedded on devices. It won't be a mass market product. I think tablets are good examples. That we have tablets that they have cellular modems on them, but they're a tiny portion of the spectrum of tablets that are being purchased. And for wearables, same thing will happen.
There was an announcement today by AT&T that they're going to have a wearable with cellular modem in it for this holiday season. So it's there. I agree. It's a market that has yet to be flushed out completely.
Next question.
We talked a lot about the privacy and security aspects that's keeping consumers relatively away from IoT so far. But could it also be the user experience aspect of it? I mean, it wasn't too long ago that people were not yet that into even human to machine, right? And now we are talking about machine to machine, and a human somehow comes in and wears one of those machines and then goes and looks at the data that it produced on another machine and makes some sense of it. Could it be that the human minds are not yet quite that savvy to really adopt that quite completely? And could it be why the few kind of savvy IoTs that you see, like Nest, is doing better than some of the others?
So I mean, actually, I agree with what you're saying. I think the privacy and the security issue is an issue down the road that becomes bigger, not necessarily the thing that's actually slowing down the market. I don't think, like, especially on the consumer side, people aren't buying it because of the issue. I think that's something they're going to realize later and becomes a big issue as more and more people adopt those types of things. I think right now it's just the utility and ease of use and desire to use, and quite honestly, the people getting over the churn. So I mean, the cost for something that a lot of people are going to put in your drawer in a couple of months. I think that's slowing the space down. But there's more and more things that are coming out that are, that's kind of shiny and new, and so people are still trying it. So I think we're kind of getting the things that are actually done really well and provide a lot of utility are getting the traction. I think the other ones are getting there 15 minutes and some more longer. But
in fact, if you ask somebody who has a Jawbone or a Fitbit, right? If you tell them that they are participating in the Internet of Things space, likelihood is that they haven't thought about that in terms of IoT. I think we are the kind of the IoT geeks here, right? Mm-hmm. If you go talk to a plant manager and say, hey, I'm going to sell you Internet of Things, he's going to throw you out of the door. He's going to say, what do you mean you're going to sell me Internet of Things? He just wants to solve a problem, right? Mm-hmm. So I think in our minds, a lot of people are not thinking of Internet of Things. They're thinking of solving a problem. And when you offer them a solution, they see the other side and say it might cause privacy concerns, security concerns, all of those issues. But that's how people are thinking.
I'm curious, anybody wearing a wearable up here?
Yep.
I mean, a regular watch or a regular
one? Okay, last question.
Leo Rachusa, first of all, thank you for the great panel. It's been amazing tonight. So I work with some startups in predictive and advanced analytics. We're trying to bring it to the business user. My question to you is, I think we can all agree there's a massive amount of data being collected, and we've talked a lot tonight about how we're going to collect it and what we're going to do with this type of thing. But as Mr. Singh has said, there's all these devices collecting the data. He wants his data back. So I'm wondering if you guys can comment a little bit about, exciting trends in, for lack of a better term, democratization of the data, getting the data back to the people that it was collected from.
I think it's going to be the other way around. Instead of giving your data away and later claim it and get it back, it's going to be selectively allowing the data to be published to the world or to people that they can, in return, give you some benefits. And we're seeing, and FOG, that a lot of networking companies are working on, is an indication of that direction, that we will have a lot more control on what we share and why in the future.
Okay, great.
Hi, so I'll just quickly jump up on stage. I've got 2 Easter eggs for you, if you just hang on a second. But first I want to thank our panel here for a wonderful discussion tonight. And I really want to thank you for hanging in there and really welcome you again, those returning and many, many new faces tonight to NetApp. I'm Val Bercovici, and I direct a lot of our research investments out of the Office of the CTO at NetApp. Clearly, this is a very, very hot topic for us as well. We'd love for all the data to be kept, but we understand that not all of it can be kept. Your mini rewards for hanging in there tonight are, one, if you have a laptop and you need to sync your email before you get out of here, there actually is an open wireless network. It's just not advertised. It's just NetApp lowercase. So that's the SSID if you need to connect. And finally, for those of you that want to share this great panel tonight with your colleagues in high definition, we have very high quality camera equipment here. We always record these sessions as part of our ongoing wonderful collaboration with the Hive, Ravi and Pashu. And I think within 24, 48 hours, it'll be on YouTube. So be careful what you said, because it's out there. So thanks again for everyone.
Thank you, Val, and really appreciate NetApp hosting us. We've had a number of great events. I think a month back, a number of you came for the Beyond MapReduce, where we had a lot of excitement. Thank you, panel. This is an amazing introduction to IoT. And someone had asked about where is GE and who was the other company, where's Qualcomm? So we will have all these people there in follow-on discussions. And thank you, Brian, for making this such a great discussion.
Thank you. Yeah.